yes, you can be same-sex attracted and not gay.
Yeah.
And it's not even like a weird cope thing. It's
Yeah.
just by the statistics, it doesn't make sense to categorize everyone who's same-sex attracted as gay because it sort of becomes arbitrary. And you'll see this in the statistics. For example, while the 30% of males and females we surveyed who found the feminine form arousing also found the sight of a vagina a turnoff, not a single survey participant who found the male form arousing were simultaneously turned off by penises. However, 26% of men who found the sight of a penis arousing simultaneously found the male form aversive. But if you prefer the female form, there's more than a 25% chance, like more than a quarter chance, you're going to find penises arousing even if you're a male.
Yeah,
Which is just fascinating. Like, what the fuck is going on here? Right? Like there's clearly like a system at play. And this is why I love researching this stuff. Because like sexologists, because they're so stuck in this gay straight dichotomy, they have missed that there is something more interesting going on. Your entire life should not be oriented around getting off as easily as possible. Like, it is so weird that for progressives, you try to like...
It's not a good look. This doesn't look the way you think it looks.
There is more to life than what turns you on. Sure, the path is harder, but we both made it through this border. You don't have to do a thing. There is more to life than feeling good. There is more to life than having wood. This is something we once understood. You don't have to do a thing.
This is important. What could be more important than
sexual arousal patterns?
Richard!
Science? Would you like to know more?
Hello, Simone! This is going to be an interesting episode.
Really?
It was inspired by conversation around a new show called My Husband's Not Gay. Around
this sounds
Mormon,
fun.
Yes, Mormon same-sex attracted men, or SSA men, who, while biologically they're same-sex attracted, prefer to live a lifestyle in which they marry a woman and have children in a heterosexual relationship. And as you can imagine, progressives are losing their mind over this. Where I saw this was in a popular YouTuber was talking about this called Curtis Connor, who's got around 5.2 million subscribers. So the video he did on this has 3.5 million views. So, you know, talk about aspirational for us, right?
My Husband's Not Gay. The episode starts with an introduction to Jeff and Tanya, who have been together for 9 years, and they also have a son together. And this is when they hear the term that they use to describe their lifestyle.
I experience SSA, or same-sex attraction.
Not gay. SSA.
What will I notice first? A beautiful man walking down the street or a beautiful woman walking down the street? I'll notice the beautiful man 9 times out of 10.
Okay, someone who's attracted to men, thinks about men, wants to be with men, but also wants to be in a hetero relationship.
Somebody that is attracted to the same sex, but wants to be in a heterosexual relationship.
Not gay, SSA.
Not gay, SSA.
That's the new no homo.
But obviously, you know, he's progressive. He made a point of whining about Trump in it. And he was like, these people shouldn't basically culturally be allowed to do this.
Oh, how dare you express your sexuality however you please.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to me that progressives are so anti-choice when it comes with individual sexuality, where they're like, if you have this arousal pattern, you have to adopt. It's funny that the way that he speaks about Mormons is exactly the way I feel about ultra progressives and their extreme limitations in terms of the types of sexual choices they let people live out. Because being aroused by men, this was not this guy's choice. What is his choice is who he chooses to marry and how he chooses to live his life.
Yeah, it's super sad. The fact that there's only one acceptable expression of love in a religion is pretty fucked up, to be honest. You're like, that's not really a religion you want to be a part of, but, you know, what do I know?
Only selectively, because there are some sexual arousal patterns that they still do not allow. Both with cause and without.
Oh, they're coming around. I'll tell you, they're coming around on this map stuff, this minor attracted person stuff. They're coming around.
Yes, however, in the UK, it's not okay to be into like BDSM, right? You know, you have to remove any.
Oh yeah, you're not allowed to be into people being hurt in
Yeah,
porn.
so
Even
you
if it's
know.
clearly consensual and you created it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's clearly consensual and animated, like cartoon, like no real people, illegal in the UK. It has been for like over a decade at this point. This was really scary living in the UK because I was like, if I go to court, like even if it's fairly tame stuff, if I go to court over pornography, that's gonna really mess up my life.
It doesn't look good on one's record at all.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point here being is that it is interesting to me that the progressive option here is to say, oh, you're a same-sex attractive Catholic and you decide to join the priesthood, which by the way, so depending on the statistics, you're looking around 50% of Catholic priests are same-sex attracted, which is just a fucking awesome cultural solution, by the way.
Yeah.
You're a culture that says you are not allowed to have same-sex relationships, but if you happen to be same-sex attracted, we have an institution for you where you can basically be an ethically sourced eunuch. So we don't need to worry about you being part of the religious hierarchy, accidentally having kids, and then you showing nepotism towards those kids. And we talk about this a lot more in some of our other content around this, but it seems like a good solution until you realize, yeah, but might that create like a weird thing around how they relate to young people under their care? And then you're like, oh yes, I can see why the Bible warns against allowing people to have leadership positions in the church if they are unmarried. I love it when people are like, but Malcolm, you're removing these people's choices. And I'm like, no, you're removing their choices. They can choose to not be a Catholic priest. They can choose to not be a Catholic. They can choose to leave the Mormon faith. These things are all optional. No one is holding a gun to their head. You're the one thing I disapprove of their choice to continue to stay in the Mormon church and live a Mormon lifestyle if they are aroused by men. I always love when I point out, I'm like, why is it that some arousal patterns mandate that you live a certain lifestyle, like live as a gay person, and there's other arousal patterns which seem just as biologically ingrained in people, just as inborn when you look at the data, where you would say you should never engage with that no matter what, ever. And they'll say, okay. It becomes mandated that you live your life that way if it doesn't cause any negative social externalities and it doesn't hurt anyone. And I'm like, really interesting. So then you must have been super homophobic and anti-gay during the AIDS epidemic, right? Because there was a reason why a lot of religions banned this, like it led to an extreme spread of disease that has killed an estimated 42.3 million people since its beginning, and in its early days spread faster and further because gay sex was beginning to become socially normalized. Now, it doesn't only spread through gay sex, but you're basically lying if you're saying that gay sex didn't contribute to the spread and the scope of the AIDS epidemic, as we can see by its decimation of the gay community. Now, obviously, the technology is different and you can have a different stance on it, but I'm asking, during the AIDS epidemic, if that's the stance you're holding, and you're like, no. See, there's a special carve out for it during the AIDS epidemic, and it's like, why? Because you have elevated this one form of arousal as holding some form of like additional religious significance that you're not allowed to question. But before we go further here, what we're going to go into is I would actually argue from the sexuality statistics is yes, you can be same-sex attracted and not gay.
Yeah.
And it's not even like a weird cope thing. It's just by the statistics, it doesn't make sense to categorize everyone who's same-sex attracted as gay because it sort of becomes arbitrary. And you'll see this in the statistics. I mean, it sounds insane when I'm saying it. And I should note, I'm saying this as a person who isn't even a little bit same-sex attracted. I remember I had a lot of gay friends growing up, and I had a long conversation with a roommate who later came out as gay, and he didn't understand why I would only watch, well, funnily, gay porn, i.e. lesbian porn. And I was like, I just like cannot get aroused if there is a male anywhere near a pornographic scene that I'm looking at. And that makes sense from an evolutionary perspective.
It does. I would imagine intuitively, to me, it seems like if you're, what was the word that was seen as very offensive super straight. If you're like, if
Super
you
straight,
were, yeah, if you were turned off by the sight of a penis, you're not going to want to see dicks in your porn.
Actually, interesting, Simone. Some of the guys who fall into this category, and you'll see this in the statistics we're about to go over, are not disgusted by the sight of a penis. They're disgusted by the sight of a male form. This is why fuda porn is so common in the hentai category.
Oh, okay, wait.
Porn
So the I'm definitely straight men are attracted to penises, but not attracted to the male form.
Well, they're not necessarily disgusted by penises. So they are okay with two
They're
women
fine
having
with
sex.
penises.
If one of those women, this is what fuda porn is for people who aren't aware, has a penis,
Mhm.
because it allows them to, even by removing males from their porn in this entirely fantasy context, see PIV, penis and vagina sex, within the porn, but have no man in that scene. And actually, when we did the survey on this and we asked men who were predominantly into fuda porn if they saw these as trans women, they do not. Most men, at least in terms of their arousal patterns, see a trans woman as a man, even if they otherwise present very femininely, which is, I think, really interesting. But
That is
let's get into the
fascinating.
statistics here. And I should clarify here that this is not what I am into. I will let it slip near the end of this discussion if you end up watching the whole video what I am into, though. But it is really important to be asking these questions. Why are certain things being seen in pornography? For example, why is fuda pornography common? And you can say, well, why is it useful to understand something like this about human arousal patterns? Here's why. Because as soon as you understand this, you can understand that many of the men who become convinced they're trans may actually just have a disgust reaction to other men. And so when they're looking at pornography or something like that, they have this disgust reaction whenever they see men, or when they look at a penis, they might have a disgust reaction to a penis, and they look at their male form in a mirror and they go, ooh, this is disgusting. Because evolution didn't have us evolve around mirrors. It never needed to not code to our own bodies to find our own bodies as gross looking. And they say, oh, I must not like being a man, when in reality, it's no, for evolutionary reasons, you didn't want to be sexually engaging in an environment where other men were present. And if you are, for example, a young autistic person whose brain isn't fully developed, you realize, oh, I am super disgusted by the sight of men, even when that man is myself. Therefore, in this ultra categorizer mindset, I must actually be a woman, when that's not what's happening at all. It's just a normal part of male sexuality. And so, because I took the time to dive into the world of pornography and look at what types of pornography are common and think about why these types of pornography might be common, I now have additional information on sexuality, so that when I am teaching my kids about their sexuality and what they might expect from it, I can inform them about this potential pitfall and perhaps prevent one of them, who might otherwise have been convinced to transition, that no, this is just a normal part of male sexuality. This is also why it's really important that we, as I've said in other videos, don't go around telling young girls that it's super weird for a girl to be into scenarios where they are hurt or subjugated by a male, because it turns out that most girls are into that. And so if you teach your daughters that, because you didn't take time to actually look into human sexuality, then they're going to grow up thinking they're a sexual deviant, which makes it much easier for them to engage in other or additional forms of sexual deviancy, because they're like, well, the cat's already out of the bag on that one. So it matters to engage with this information.
Let's do it.
All right. So, and I'm just going to be quoting from The Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality, one of the books we wrote, and which we did big series of surveys for. I need to break this down here. So what we are arguing in this particular subsection is that the arousal pattern does not seem cued to males and females. It seems more cued to primary and secondary sex characteristics. So if you're not sure what primary and secondary sex characteristics are, primary sex characteristics are the sex characteristics which are used directly in reproduction. So this would be a penis or a vagina. Secondary sex characteristics are things cued to things other than direct reproduction. So this would be what are the words I'm looking for here? Like a masculine or feminine form, a masculine or feminine voice, masculine or
Yeah,
feminine
like feet,
gait.
hands, vocal tone, all sorts of general clues or themes. It's
Yeah,
almost
and-
like if a penis or a vagina, they're the language, the secondary sexual characteristics are the accent, the lilt, the tonality, the music of the language.
Yes. The point here being is that it turns out that it's actually fairly frequent that an individual will find one particular gender's secondary sex characteristics arousing or repulsive, and have an inverse arousal or repulsion to the primary sex characteristics.
In other words, it's like each person gets several rolls of the dice, and most people's understanding of sexuality is you get one roll of the dice. You're into men or you're into women, or
You're into women.
you're into both. Like the dice, like it's like it's like, it fell on a corner and it won't fall one way or the other. What really is happening is you're getting several rolls of the dice. You get to roll on vaginas, you get to roll on penises, you get to roll on butts, you get to roll on feet, you get to roll on shapes, you get to roll on hits, and like you're getting all these things. And
well, no, what I'm arguing is you're not getting several rolls of the dices.
Oh,
you're getting
really?
2 rolls of the dices. It's what gender primary sex characteristics do you want? Like, what gender secondary sex characteristics do you like?
So it's just so so basically all primary and all secondary were correlated in the research.
Are generally correlated and bundled together.
I thought they were unbundled, but
no, they're not unbundled.
Since we've done this. Okay.
Primary and secondary sex characteristics are heavily bundled in our data, which is
I'm thinking about just random arousal things,
Yeah, that's not what this is. This is,
I'm thinking about like pain, shaming, dominance.
Those are not unbundled, by the way. Those appear in bundled packages as well.
These things are bundled,
but we'll get into that in a separate video.
Okay.
Before we go further, we have to note here about our sexual theory that we lay out in the Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality. I won't go that far into it, but we argue that sexuality is not a spectrum from disinterest to arousal. It is a spectrum from arousal to disgust, with disinterest in the middle. And that the disgust feeling is literally operating off of the arousal system with a negative modifier attached to it, or vice versa. The two emotions are exact inverts of each other. When you are aroused, you look at something longer, you typically breathe inwards, your pupils typically dilate. When you are disgusted by something, you typically look away from it, you typically hold your nose or attempt to not breathe, and your pupils contract. You try to get away from it if you're disgusted, you try to interact with it more if you're aroused. It is the same system. And the data supports this in that when the system breaks, you are much more likely to be aroused by something that most people find disgusting, or disgusted by something that most people find arousing, than random. Like for example, people don't find fire disgusting or arousing, but many people have a strong emotional reaction to fire or heights. Fetishes around fire or heights are incredibly rare. It's not any strong, naturally pre-evolved emotion. But arousal to creepy crawlers, like having insects poured on your face, that's actually a pretty common fetish. Arousal to the feces, urine, stuff like that, actually pretty common. So things that cause natural disgust are actually pretty common to create fetishes, because you're basically getting the multiply by negative mixed up, or multiply by positive mixed up at some point in the developmental process or genetic process. All right, so to what we're saying here. Our study yielded some supporting evidence for this. It seems to be very common for an individual to find female primary sex characteristics aversive, but female secondary sex characteristics arousing, i.e. to find the feminine form arousing, but a vagina gross. Our survey study showed that 30% of males and 32% of females who find the female form arousing find vaginas aversive. That is astronomically high. That's much bigger than the reported gay population, which I think shows that this is just a better description of what's going on than gay or straight. Our research also suggests that in the average person, the secondary sex characteristic detecting system has a much higher average quote unquote volume than the system detecting primary sex characteristics. For example, the average guy will derive more arousal from the feminine form than they will from the vagina. From our survey, 89% of men rate the female form at the highest level of arousal generation, while only 71% rate the vagina the same way. We find it amusingly ironic that the organs used explicitly for reproduction cause less arousal than secondary sex characteristics. We developed these two theories before running our survey. While there are ways we can twist our data to fit them as we did above, we must be honest and admit that our data really suggests that something a little more complicated is going on. So I was wrong when I told Simone earlier that they are totally bundled. They are loosely bundled in very weird ways, which we'll get into in a second. For example, while the 30% of males and females we surveyed who found the feminine form arousing also found the sight of a vagina a turnoff, not a single survey participant who found the male form arousing were simultaneously turned off by penises. Not a single participant who found the male form arousing were turned off by penises. However, 26% of men who found the sight of a penis arousing simultaneously found the male form aversive. So there's something weird going on with penises and vaginas specifically. If you find the male form arousing, you are always going to find penises arousing. But if you prefer the female form, there's more than a 25% chance, like more than a quarter chance, you're going to find penises arousing, even if you're a male.
Yeah,
which is
isn't that
just
interesting?
fascinating. Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is going on here? Right? Like, there's clearly like a system at play. And this is why I love researching this stuff. Because
Yeah.
like sexologists, because they're so stuck in this gay straight dichotomy, they have missed that there is something more interesting going on.
Yeah, it is so curious. And I'm so glad that Ayla, for example, is looking more into this. You know, there are actually people out there really diving deep with great sample sizes too.
And before I go further, this also, I think, shows how narrow and religious the dichotomy of gay straight is as an identification. And it's really an identity identification no different from a religious identity identification. And I have no trouble with these Mormon men who are like, yeah, I'm same-sex attracted, but I choose not to live that lifestyle. Why is that such a fucking problem that these people are doing that? Like, it's genuinely harder in a number of ways if you want to have a lot of kids. They're like, oh, you can have a lot of kids if you're in a same-sex relationship. Not in really. It's extremely expensive.
Well, if you're a woman in a same-sex relationship, you get double power.
True.
You
But
got
if you're
extra
a man,
bonus.
if you're a man, it's extremely
It is.
difficult.
Yeah. We
We
just
have
had
one of our kids' godparents are two gay men, and
Mhm.
they've been trying to find a surrogate to work with them for half a decade at this point or something.
yeah, getting the right surrogate match, getting egg donors, creating embryos. This is an often heartbreaking, incredibly frustrating, and very expensive process. And it's tough. And I can totally see why someone who is prenatalist and broadly same-sex attracted. But I think there's also this issue of it's weird that we would question people's chosen relationship formation when there are such things as political lesbians, for example. Like they're not questioned the same way.
Yeah, you're right. So for people who don't know what a political lesbian is, this was a phenomenon that was common, especially on Tumblr and within progressive circles, where women would say, I just hate men so much, I will force myself to be lesbian, which is actually pretty easy for women if you look at the data, because women's predominant arousal patterns are not tied to the gender of the partner, they are tied to dominance and submission. But continue.
Yeah, so that they're not controversial, but it is seen as incredibly taboo or hypocritical for a same-sex attracted man to marry a woman. Like that seems weird. You know, there are many even more logical reasons for a same-sex attracted man to do that, not just religion, but also, yeah, I want to have kids, or it's just, you know, it.
Well, progressives treat this as like a sacred thing. It's a sacred caste system for them. That's what I think is going on here, right? Like the urban monoculture sees gays that identify and take on a gay lifestyle as a deserving upper class, and they just cannot understand why anyone wouldn't want this designation, because it made their actual goals in life, not arousal, easier. right? And they can be like, why don't they just adopt? Well, as one person said on our survey, our studies, when they learned that of adoptees, because we mentioned this, and you have a face that's become like a meme in the community, 1% of adoptees whose biological parents had 3 or more offenses were responsible for 30% of convictions among adoptees. The 1% of adoptees whose parents had 3 or more convictions were responsible for 30% of the offenses among adoptees. You were like, oh, when you heard this, which is to say, the genetics that are correlated with the type of person who you might adopt are going to play out in their childhood and in their adulthood, and it can provide a good reason why somebody might be like, I really want to have genetically my own kids. I really want to choose who their parents are.
Yeah.
And I get that. And I think that you denying someone the right to do that when you, as a heterosexual male, for example, that's just natural for you to be able to do that for free. And you're like, oh, well, they should just stomach that. It's like, why should they have to stomach that roll of the dice, right? Like, they should be able to have kids the way that they want to have kids.
Yeah.
And
Well, and that we seem to, in our society, force some forms of sexual attraction. Like, some forms of sexual attraction mean, okay, this means that you now have this identity and you're part of this community, and you need to adopt these accents and have these idols, and that is going to be your life now. Whereas there are other ones where it's like, oh, that's your arousal pattern? Okay, well, never tell anyone, suppress it. This is evil. You are evil for holding this. Whatever you do, do not tell anyone about this. Don't do it. Don't think about it. Like, suppress it. Turn it off.
This is why in our culture, we've actually taken a pretty, and I think we'll get to more stats in a second, but I think the solution for pronatalism, the correct solution to get through this particular crucible, is to completely disintermediate arousal and childbearing and relationship structure.
That's the thing. That's the other thing I wanted to bring up, is that the idea that we are building marriages, lifelong partnerships that are really much more about aligned values and complementary skill sets on sexual attraction, and not the 99.9% of the other things that you need to make your lifelong partnership work, is so insane to me. And it's not how things were done
insane,
in the past.
it's gross.
Well, it is both. It's gross and very illogical. But
it also removes the urban monoculture's biggest hook. If you can tell your kids, I don't care what porn you're into, what fan fictions you're into, what shipping you're into.
Can't help it, I just think that they would make such a good pair. In canon, they have never met. I don't care, I ship it, I don't care. I know that they are siblings, but I think there's something more. If she were dating that guy, they'd be banging, I'm sure. Princess can't really be that bad. You're on the canon ground, I'm up in crack ship space. Let's start a shipping war. Don't care if I get hate. Don't like my pairings. Well, then you can hit the bricks. This is my OTP. I'll go down with this ship.
All I care about is the way that you choose to live your life. When you destigmatize arousal patterns and you say your arousal patterns are accepted, whatever they are, so long as you do not act on them and you choose to live a virtuous life despite whatever arousal patterns you have, I think that removes one of the major hooks the left can use to get into your kids and pull them out of society. And if you want to, and if you watch our video on masturbation where we talk more about this, if you want to remove anything that's anti-biblical in this, you can just say, okay, well then only porn that is drawn like hentai or something like that, or AI generated, because then you're not looking at a woman other than your wifeless lust. And by the way, there is nothing in the Bible about women not masturbating.
There is nothing in the Bible about hentai. I checked.
You have nothing in the Bible about
hentai. Not there. So, fair game.
By the way, the people use the story of Onan to try to argue that God is against masturbation is like psychotic and disgusting. If you are not familiar with this story, there is a law in Jewish tradition that you are supposed to, if somebody dies, their closest genetic relative, their sibling, is supposed to sleep with their wife to get them pregnant so that that family's line can continue, which is actually really important to that woman because a single woman without any kids in this society was quite difficult. And so this guy was commanded to sleep with his dead brother's wife to give that guy a continuing legacy. But rather than raising a kid, he would sleep with the wife, it appears. He would actually have sex with her, use her as a fucking Oni hole, but then come outside of her to ensure she didn't get pregnant. This had nothing to do with masturbation. It had to do with somebody psychotically using his brother's wife as an Oni hole and not getting her pregnant, and not allowing his brother to have the legacy that he was legally and religiously bound to do. Well, I would note, and as you pointed out, the period where the type of porn that the Bible warns against is actually fairly a short period, where you could have been looking at a picture of a real woman and not a drawn or AI generated woman. You're looking at a period of maybe like 80 years, where that, maybe not even widely available, maybe 30 years in all of human history, which is pretty wild there. And again, if you want to see our video on the Bible and masturbation, you can watch it. If you've been told that the Bible says masturbation is bad, that's like a lie. Like, it's a big lie. If you actually, the Bible even talks about like emissions and categorizes them, and the emissions associated with masturbation are considered the same type of negative as having a period.
Wait, how many categories of emissions are there? There must be the overnight ones that have
no, there's diseased emissions, which create a longer. Actually, the Bible interestingly categorizes pent up emissions. So like people who haven't masturbated in a long time is having a uniquely like bad type of emission that requires additional
ablutions.
Ablutions and cleansing and stuff like that. This is the Old Testament stuff, so it may not be relevant
Lord
anymore.
Almighty. Okay, wow.
But basically, people made up a bunch of rules about sexuality and then claimed they were in the Bible when they're not in the Bible.
Okay.
Okay, anyway, continue. What's more, our assumptions, and again, people can say, well, doesn't the Bible say all this stuff around gay sex? No, it says stuff around you participating in gay sex. You shall not sleep with a man as you would a woman. It doesn't say you can't jack off to gay porn. Specifically here, I'm referring to gay porn that is drawn or AI generated and doesn't use real people. It says that you shouldn't sleep with a man as you would a woman. That's two totally different things. If one of my kids was like, oh, I want to jack off to gay porn, I'm like, well, great. The Bible says nothing about that. Just don't marry a guy. Now, this is what I would recommend. Would I be okay if they really wanted to marry a guy? I mean, it depends on the technology we have in that period, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that the number one thing is having kids, passing their culture on to the next generation.
I don't think it's not going to be a problem to marry. Dude, I'm super okay with guys marrying guys, especially like if they find some way to have a lot of kids. It's more, and honestly, artificial womb technology is coming along. I think it's going to be okay for any of our sons who are thusly inclined. But I'm just saying.
Hold on, we got to go on with the statistics. We're getting to what were you going to say?
Well, there are worlds and scenarios in which it would make more sense even for two straight men to couple up and raise a family together than it is for straight men to pair off with women. Like I could even see society getting so toxic and so fractured whereby straight men just have to swear off women entirely because they've gone completely off the deep end on average. You know, like there is a world in which it makes sense to have a dual income male family. It just, I don't know. I feel like there also have been a lot of gay power couples, you know, who they're both economically and career-wise very successful. I'm just arguing that there is probably a world, not a world far from our timeline, in which it would be, from a fertility standpoint, advantageous for two straight men to enter a lifelong partnership to raise children successfully. Okay.
Well, and you know, you mentioned that, but like, even think about the MGTOW community. This is what I mean about disintermediating sexuality from child rearing. You could have two like ultra Chad alphas deciding to live together and raise kids together, but fucking tons of other women.
You're describing Andrew Tate and his brother.
Right. I basically am there. But the point that I'm making is this doesn't have to be like gay. It can actually be the opposite of gay if you're doing this.
Andrew
You can
Tate and his
be doing
brother.
this
I
and
mean,
you can sleep around a ton
Mm.
while you are raising kids with someone who you respect, who you know isn't gonna. The point being is there are alternate ways of structuring things
mhm.
that can work. They're not what we've chosen, but that isn't to say that they can't work. So anyway, to keep going here. What's more, our assumption that secondary sex characteristics are all operating on the same sex system may be wrong, as 15% of women who reported to find the female form arousing in our surveys also reported to see breasts as an active turnoff. And yet we don't see this happening in males. It would seem that humans may have dozens of independent arousal systems, which may or may not cloister. To what you were saying here. Weirder still, some of the arousal systems seem to cloister in only one gender. For example, in men, arousal from the female form and breasts are tied together, but in women, it is common to assume arousal from one and not the other. And keep in mind how high these numbers are. That 15% of women, huge, like way more than the gay population, find the female form arousing, but breasts actively disarousing. That's
That's
weird.
interesting. Yeah.
Okay, now we're gonna go into like the later section where we go like deep into the data on this, okay? But first, let's get the conventional interpretation of this out of the way. Typically, quote unquote, gay is a method of self identification for individuals who are more aroused by stimuli they associate with individuals who identify as the same gender as themselves. In 2017, 4.5% of Americans identified as gay. This 4.5% number was reported by a Gallup poll, and we understand it is much lower than most people think. As the same poll showed, Americans think the gay identifying population is 10 to 23%. For information on this phenomenon, see the paper Not Threat But Threatening Potential Causes and Consequences of Gay Innumeracy, which found overestimation of the size of the gay population to be common among groups that see them as a threat. A more updated breakdown indicate, it's also, I'm sure, common among ultra progressives and gay people. A more updated breakdown of this phenomenon shows it isn't subsiding. The Gallup article titled America Still Greatly Overestimate the US Gay Population shows this. In our survey, only 3% of the participants identified as gay and 8.75% identified as bisexual. Our number is a bit low because we removed trans and gender fluid participants from the data set, which identified predominantly as gay or bisexual, which our survey's trans and gender fluid participants added back in, we get around the right number identifying as gay. So now for the crazy stuff before we go into the individual like scatter plots, which I find really interesting on this. 10% of males find the naked male form aversive, but penises to be arousing. Of the men, so way more than the gay population, literally like 3x the gay population. Of men who find the naked female form arousing, a whopping 30% find the sight of a vagina to be actively aversive, which just nobody likes vaginas. That's basically what you see from the survey.
We including women, which I really relate to. I was encouraged as a teenage girl, you know, you gotta learn about puberty to like hold a mirror down there. I've never seen down there, not once in my life, because I don't want to. I feel like it's like staring into the maw of that monster in Star Wars. I do not like. I don't.
Sarlacc pit.
Yes, I don't. That's what I'm afraid I'm gonna see if I look down there. I do not like it. Just so disgusting to me. So disgusting. So I really get that, and I think I think it's another one of those things of like just generally people like penises. Generally, vaginas are like, you know.
Okay. So to continue going,
Yeah.
only 1% of males who find the female form arousing simultaneously find breast to be a turnoff, but 15% of females who find the female form arousing find breast to be a turnoff. In general, we find female attraction to the male form correlates strongly to attraction to penises. While 16.5% of women who took our survey identified as gay or bisexual, a larger 30% of women who took our survey found both vaginas and the naked female form arousing. So
Poor women.
1.5% are gay or bisexual, but 30% find women hot in every way. Though oddly, only 18% of women found both breasts and vaginas to be arousing. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
Oh, sorry, it was either breasts or vaginas. Okay, so this seems to be the way that interesting. So it appears that many women who find the female form and breasts arousing
Mhm.
don't identify themselves as bisexual because they find vaginas repulsive and
Mhm.
they assume that these things are correlated when they're not.
Yeah, because we've been completely led in this entire field of research for our entire lives. So
Like wild that like sexuality researchers haven't picked up on this. I feel like the entire field of sexuality research is such like retarded children at this point.
well, part of it though, I feel like there's so much inertia, not just because of how academia works, but because in our society, so much of someone's identity now is tied to one's chosen or
Yeah, you can't
self-identified
question it.
sexuality. Yeah, because if we were to begin pulling that down, and as this show is that you described, right? This show comes out and people are like, "What do you mean?" And that's because it's pulling at this very scary fundamental reality shifting concept.
Yeah. All right. Though only 6% of men who took our survey identified as gay or bisexual, 11.4% of the men who took our survey find both the male form and penises arousing. So the are totally straight thing, this is another thing to note when we're talking about this population as a genuinely discriminated population in our country, i.e., men who find the male form and females arousing, they are likely as big a population as the percent of men and identify as straight. They are likely as big a population as the people in our country who identify as LGBT. That is absolutely wild.
So what is this? The dark matter of gay men, the
Well, I call it
hidden.
the Are Totally Straight watchers. For people who don't know Are Totally Straight, it was a subreddit for men who identified as straight but like to masturbate to males. And I'm like, I'm fucking okay with that. You want to identify as straight. Straight is about how you choose to live, do what you want, right?
Well, and you know what's really interesting too is that no one bats an eye when a lot of women online start adopting, like, so drag culture is a big trickle down culture
Yeah.
generator, right? No one bats an eye when people want to be culturally gay, even when they're not gay, because gay culture is super fun. I don't know what to say, but yet, somehow you can't choose to not adopt it if you have one arousal pathway that you have no control over. I think that's really interesting that, like, yeah, no, everyone's welcome to adopt gay culture. You may not be able to pull it off, but you can try.
This is something we keep going back to. Your entire life should not be oriented around getting off as easily as possible. Like, it is so weird that for progressives, you try to like.
It's not a good look. This
this-
doesn't look the way you think it looks.
Yeah, you don't need to build your marriage, your relationship, everything you do around that. And I'd ask you, Mr. Progressive, who's here being like, no, you absolutely need to build your
Mr.
entire life
Strawman,
around
Malcolm,
arousal
let's
patterns.
be
Mr. Straw. No, but I know there's somebody watching this who feels this way.
Okay.
Is there literally nothing that you're turned on by that would be deleterious to society if you engaged in it? Literally nothing? Oh, and you're like, oh, well, that's a different category of thing. Why is that a different category of thing? Why? For an individual who wants to have lots of kids, it may be deleterious to marry a man. Why is that a different thing? It's a different thing because you want to, and there's this sick pleasure that I see progressives get off on, is labeling men who are in happy marriages and have lots of kids as gay. They're like, oh, he's gay. I bet he's so gay. It's like, so pathetic, right? Like, they engage in this sort of homophobic behavior that they claim to be against because they want to control the way that people live and force them into specific lifestyles and relationships that they have chosen not to engage with. And you can't deal with the fact that they have chosen to say, yes, this arouses me, but I will not base my life around it. Anyway, thoughts before I go further?
No, proceed.
Male arousal in response to breasts seemed to correlate with arousal in response to the female form. 87% of our male respondents reported both to be arousing. There is a similar correlation in females in response. If a female survey respondent reported finding the male form arousing, it was very likely she would also find penises to be arousing, 71% finding both to be arousing. But keep in mind, that's not like 100%. That means around 30% of females who found the male form arousing and identify as straight do not find penises arousing. Not a single female in our survey group reported vaginas to be arousing and the naked female form aversive. Very interesting. 7% of the female study population found the naked male form arousing, but the sight of a vagina aversive. 6% of our female respondents found both breast arousing and the vagina aversive. 2% of the female study takers found the sight of a vagina arousing, but breast to be aversive. 36% of the female we polled found both the naked female form and the vagina aversive. And you know what? I'll just be posting these while we're talking because it's much easier than going over them in detail. But they are the charts that show the female breast arousing, naked female form arousing, female vagina arousing, etc. Because I find that to be really interesting. And now we can get to size. You want to get into size here?
Penis size?
Penis and breast size. What do people prefer?
Oh gosh, yeah, this classic old favorite of ours.
Yeah, and I'd point out here, just remember again that only 3% of our participants identified as gay and only 8.75% identified as bisexual. So these numbers are of mostly females and males who do not identify as gay or bisexual, okay? Female, what breast size do you find most arousing in women? I'm just putting this on screen here. The statistic I find most interesting is I do not find breasts arousing at all, despite the 3%, only 1% of men, this includes gay and bi men, find breasts not arousing at all. Pretty much all males, whether they're gay, straight, bi, whatever, find breasts arousing. But here's what's interesting. In women, the percent that do not find breasts not arousing at all is only 23%. If finding breasts arousing makes you gay or bi, almost every woman is gay or bi.
Well, I mean, that's also kind of what the findings indicate, though, that most women are at least that they're more attracted to dominance versus submission than they are attracted to any particular primary or secondary sexual characteristic. So for women, it's kind of a misnomer to be like, are you gay or straight? It's more like, what power dynamic are you into? That's more their orientation.
Absolutely. All right. So, okay, here's a fun one. Penis size in men. What do you prefer? Okay. So I'm putting this on screen here, but again, I think I do not find penises arousing at all statistic to be the most interesting. What percent of men don't find penises arousing at all? 69%.
Appropriate.
So in a world where 3%, and this is below average, 3% of our participants identified as gay, 8.75% identified as bisexual, a good 30% of men found penises arousing.
I mean, you know, there's so much more. I want to say user friendly than vaginas. I mean, look at like penises correlate with the attraction sphere and vaginas correlate with the disgust sphere in my world. I'm sorry to come across as such a vagina hater in this video, but like when you think about it, watch the movie Alien, right? What is the alien but an inverted, like a prolapsed vagina? It's just like all mucus, all just, you know, like vaginas are associated with disgust.
Aliens, the thing it shoots out of its mouth is clearly supposed to be reminiscent of a penis.
I know, but it's goopy, you know. Ugh. Sorry, I don't know. Anyway,
by the way,
cut this out. We don't need my sex negativity in this room. This is a sex positive space.
I think people need to be affirmed in having these sex negative opinions.
In their sex negativity.
No, sex negative people need to like rise up. And by rise up, what I mean is they need to understand that their perspectives are, and I hate to use this term, valid, but that doesn't mean that they need to impose them on other people.
No, that's so
A-
true. Yes, yes, yeah. Well, and the so important thing, and why I love the Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality as a book so much, is it like the message it hammers home again and again is your arousal and disgust pathways are not an indication of moral good or bad. Your logic is that indication. You decide for yourself what is good or bad in this world, what is moral. If something disgusts you, that doesn't mean it's evil. And I think that's the big problem is a lot of women are turned on by violent erotic material. And then a portion of women are like super turned off by it. And then they can't understand that while not morally condoning this material, some women just kind of want to watch it. And they're like, no one could ever watch this and it's evil and blah, blah, blah. And just so many things get screwed up, you know, like a lot of people are turned on by the concept of RAPE, like for real. It's a big turn on. That doesn't mean that they condone it or ever want it to happen. It would be terrible.
We asked how much, just so there was no confusion about whether this was a fantasy or not a fantasy. We go, how much do you like the fantasy or role play of grape? And then immediately after that, we make, how much do you get turned on by the idea of actually being raped? There's a huge number of women. I can't remember. I didn't post. So for role play of grape, it was for females, 38%, males, 16%. And that is being on the receiving end of it. In terms of actually it happening to you, males, 23%, females, 5%. And if you're looking at just general statistics on this, you will find that around 4% to 5% of reported grape cases report women feeling physiological arousal during the process. So this is wild. I was looking for the text on the grape statistics in the book, and I found a section I had forgotten about that breaks them down by attractiveness rating. And so this is subjective attractiveness rating, how attractive an individual sees themselves as being. But unattractive men taking our survey were much more likely to report finding grape roleplay arousing, with 66% of the lowest level attractiveness finding it a turn on, contrasted with 10% of average men and 14% of hot men. The same is true for females, but to a lesser extent, with 44% of the least attractive category of women reporting arousal at the idea of role-playing being graped, contrasted with 22% of women for average attractiveness. We see similar results for the thought of actual grape, with 20% of women in the least attractive category finding it arousing, and only 3% of women in the average category finding it arousing. The same is seen among respondents for our male study participants, with 50% in the least attractive category finding grape arousing, and only 2% of men in the attractive category finding grape arousing.
Yeah, disturbing, deeply disturbing, but not like, because there are evolutionary reasons why surviving women who were kind of okay with this happening to them, you know, why there were more surviving women than the ones who were like, I will die before I let this happen to me, because they died. They didn't reproduce, as it just so happens. So yeah, I mean, there are reasons why this happens, and it's not great, but it's what it is, you know, and just accepting reality, being pragmatic about it is the key. Yeah.
I really, one of the things that the guy kept mentioning in the video, this progressive guy watching this video, these Mormons who are like totally okay with this, and he's like just so disgusted and judgmental of them that they are, he's like, they're so supportive for non-supportive of being gay, right? And it's like, no, what they are is supportive of these people's choices. And I look forward of the day, life choices that you don't support, the day where we enter a society in which people can talk about the things that arouse them, and that can be completely divorced from the way they're expected to live their life.
Yeah.
One of the weirdest things I've heard about the urban monoculture, and it's so true, is it's almost like you're expected to like go out and search for all the things that can turn you on, even if you would never want to know if something could turn you on. Even if you're like, for example, like the map stuff, like minor attractive person stuff. Why would you ever want to know if that would turn you on?
Wait, there's some kind of insinuation that people should be exploring that?
Well, no, there basically is. It's like you should go through every category of porn. This is basically something that a lot of like young people are explore sexuality. Explore your sexuality. That's what they say.
You gotta turn it off like a light switch. Just switch. It's a neat little Mormon trick.
Turn it off like a light switch. It's a cool little Mormon trick. Really what's so hard about that?
I'll put that in. Yeah, that's a good clip there. Right. Like but the thing is like, you don't even need to know. If you haven't been exposed to something, you might not know that it would ever arouse you. Right. Like, you don't actually have a mandate to explore this stuff. It doesn't matter. It's genetic scars. If it's something you didn't have a choice over, it's not part of who you are.
Genetic
Who you
scars. It's a
are
great way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah.
are the things you choose to be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100% separate your sexuality with, it's not like, we don't marry people based on our tastes in food, for example. You know, if we should see them as just as connected. I mean, I get that traditionally reproducing with someone who disgusted you would be really difficult, but we have the technology to not need to reproduce that way. None of our children were produced through sex. We have sex, but none of our children were produced through that process. They were produced through IVF because I am super infertile. There are ways around you not necessarily wanting to bang your partner each night. And also, there are amazing alternatives to using another person to sexually gratify yourself. And, you know, especially now with AI, combine AI with like really good sex toys. And I don't know. I just don't know why a quote unquote loveless marriage is a bad thing anymore, considering where we are in society with technology, with AI, and with the clear need for much more pragmatic and practical, mutually beneficial relationships, life partnerships.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'd also note here, and I somewhat tipped my hand on this, but it's one of the reasons I feel so strongly about this, which is to say that if I am somebody who is a straight male who is aroused by I'm an extremely dominant straight male. Like, I'm overly straight and overly dominant in my arousal patterns, to the extent where if I am presented with super normal stimuli of dominance or straightness, i.e., here's an example of supernormal stimuli. Two women having sex is a supernormal stimuli for a guy to be engaging in, right? Like, this is all women, just like extra. It's funny. Somebody mentioned it's a fairly normal thing for guys to be into because I remember one comedian, he's like, you know, you ask women what they're into and they're like, oh, I'm into like X weird thing, or I'm into Y weird thing. And for men, it's like, more women. I want one woman, two women, good. 3 women, better. 4 more women is better. And then also more dominance, right? Like, more dominance better, to the extent where if I treated a real person that way, it would be deleterious to them outside of very controlled, like, role play scenarios. And I am able to say, I don't need to structure my life around this because I realize it's deleterious and not good for daily living.
Yeah, well, just how much time it takes. And it's one thing to be a dink couple that just chooses to make this your hobby, but yeah, they're way more efficient ways to do it. Even if you want to maximize your amount of pleasure, including sexual gratification, it's easier to do it without a human, because just when you involve a human in it, then there's just this additional layer of all the coordination and the prep and the cleanup and the aftercare. And it's just like, can we not find a better way to do this?
Exactly. Well, here's a great way to put this, right? Is, would I be more aroused? Like, if I was arousal maxing my life to have a 24/7 like live-in slave. This is something that some couples do. They structure their relationship with a wife and they 24/7.
Yeah, look up Gorian forums, Gorean.
Gorians have this, and like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I would be more aroused by that lifestyle. Would I be more happy in that lifestyle? No, I want somebody who I respect and can have conversations with and enjoy talking to, and who can push me and who can work and who can earn money, and they don't need to like dote on all day or like have some sort of weird master slave sexual interaction.
No, honestly, and this is another thing that came up in the sexuality book, though, is that when it comes down to it, not a lot of people want to be super dominant because it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
You don't want to manage that. Yeah, it's a lot of energy.
I can be like, I prefer this in a narrative context, right?
Yeah.
But in my actual fucking life, that would be a nightmare.
Like to have to
Like,
maintain frame all the time, exhausting, exhausting.
well, and that's the thing. You can have a frame that would be most arousing for you that isn't your fucking personality. And you're like,
yeah.
but with the urban monoculture, it's like, oh no, you'd be most aroused by having a live-in slave. You got to do that. That's the only option for you. It's like, no, it's not the only option for you. You can say, oh, I don't need to. I can either make that some sort of like role play scenario, but even that would take a long time to set up. Like, why not just porn? Right? Like, why do I need to?
Why not porn? Yeah.
No, it's.
But you know what?
faster.
Here's the thing, though, and here's our glimmer of hope, Malcolm. Is that it's I don't know, maybe it's not a glimmer of hope. Society seems to have discovered this. Have you seen rates of sex recently? People have
Oh, yeah, they're
discovered.
plummeting.
All right, like we're in a post-sex society. I think now we've gone half the way there, right? Okay, so we've gone to the point where we've acknowledged we don't need other people to sexually gratify ourselves. Now we have to go the rest of the way of, oh, but we should still probably form life partnerships with people and raise families because it's a really fun, cool thing to do, and you know everyone's better off for it. So
Absolutely.
yeah, let's just separate them all, divorce it completely. Okay, done. Well, I'm glad we talked this through. Society fixed. I love you.
Society fixed. I love you. You're a great wife. What am I having for dinner tonight?
If I can find bread, it seems to have disappeared. A grilled cheese sandwich with tomato soup, or maybe if you're up for it, quesadilla with tomato soup, or I can do pot stickers, which I think I still have.
Quesadilla with tomato soup. I haven't had a quesadilla in ages.
A quesadilla, or as our children say,
The extra
quesadilla.
carb- I love you to death, Simone.
We still need to. Oh my god, I was thinking about like what we. This, you need to take this out, but I was thinking like, well, if we had a merch shop, because I was looking at other channels similar to us, and a lot of them had merch, and I was like, well, we would only ever do like an Etsy shop with like really custom stuff, and like someone would reach out to us about t-shirts, and I'm like, well, obviously we'd make a of your and spell that in the shop.
Why?
Amazing! It's a great. It is perfect. I mean, I've you know, like in all the porn I've seen, I've never seen a that I thought looked better than yours.
You're not the only woman who has noted that.
I know that, and I'm like, well, we could sell a Malcolm in our merch shop.
You're so creepy, Simone.
It's sad that only I am enjoying it. You know, like it's a loss to humanity. So I was like, you know, I mean, if anything, people would go to the merch shop just to see the. And then maybe they might buy one of our artisan shirts, or you know, handmade a paper planes by Octavian, which he would certainly want to list on the shop. So
No, but I what I love about this in this conversation is it, and I think it's where we need to go with the society. We need to
Okay.
both destigmatize sexuality and decouple it from moral mandates and identity. I think once that is done, the left has nothing it can use to get your kids.
No. Yeah, the left can't get you.
Your kids.
Well, you know, if you take the identity out of politics and you don't have identity politics anymore, oh my gosh, suddenly we return to the age of debates and, you know, rational conversation. And wouldn't that be amazing? So yeah, again, society fixed. I will go make your dinner.
Love you.
Love you too. Oh my god. Oh. Make sure I'm gonna switch us to the right sides.
For our autistic audience.
You know what? Last night I was watching Titan line up gummies in a little neat line and then eat them. And I realized she's coming over to the fold, Malcolm.
Oh no, we got another one. Are we
Another
just having
systematizer.
A royal flush of autistic children.
I hope so, honestly.
So far, all of our kids old enough to be diagnosed with autism have been. So, and has Simone. So this is what I get for choosing a autist.
Autists, autismal children.
Autismal. I prefer
Yeah.
autism than hotist. Actually, I like hotist. The
Hottest.
hotist net is such a thing in the
HAUTIST. TS, right?
Well, no, well, that's the way they call it, like hottie culture or whatever. But like, it's meant to mean
Hottie
the
culture.
person who coined it. I don't know if they've said it online, but they are a famous friend of ours that I really like, and she coined it to mean hot women who are artistic and all hang out in a
Oh,
community together.
I still like artisanal, but whatever.
Anyway,
Oh, so she actually meant hot, as in HOT, not
yeah,
HAT.
she means
She meant
the hot,
hottest.
smart, autistic women.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
yeah,
she
yeah.
was talking about.
Yeah. Well, I thought you were referring to HAUTE,
Yeah. Anyway,
but you would
okay,
never
so
use French, of course. What was I thinking? Yes, go on.
You don't have to do a thing. A thought can be a thought without anyone seeing. A kink can be a kink without anyone knowing. You don't have to do a thing. I support that you want to dress up like a girl, but when you do that in front of kids, man, it makes me want to hurl. You don't have to do a thing. You don't have to do a thing. There is more to life than what turns you on. Sure, the path is harder, but we might meet it through this border. You don't have to do a thing. There is more to life than feeling good. There is more to life than having wood. This is something we once understood. You don't have to do a thing. So go ahead and fall in love. Build on earth what's above. Go out there and find a wife. Sex is not the point of life. You don't have to do a thing. Ahead and fall in love. Build on earth what's above. Go out there and find a wife. Sex is not the point of life. You don't have to do a thing. You don't have to do a thing. There is more to life than what turns you on. Sure, the path is harder, but we might meeting through this border. You don't have to do a thing. There is more to life than feeling good. There is more to life than having wood. This is something we once understood. You don't have to do a thing. So go ahead and fall in love. Build on earth what's above. Go out there and find a wife. Sex is not the point of life. You don't have to do a thing.